want to talk about something a little bit more unique. I want to talk about the Jewish economy and like people that put up no trespassing signs or that have private property signs or have guard dogs and all these different things. And I want us to think about these things I want to bring it to a perspective of some of God's Bible laws in the Bible so that we might know and understand how this will all work. And I'm going to go through it in the beginning in a little bit different way, and I'm going to tie it in at the end with different Bible verses that are going to flip the whole thing kind of around but bring it together. Seems kind of confusing right now, but it'll make sense shortly. In Matthew 5, verse 14, the Bible tells us, "Ye are the light of the world." So, what does that mean? We're a light of the world. If we're a light of the world, that means that the things that we do speak of God. Everything we do should be a living testimony, whether it's in our business, in our work, the way we dress. Everything should be counted, and that even includes our homes. So, how does that fit with like no trespassing signs? Are you starting to see where I'm going? Let's just bring in another verse here from Matthew 25:33 to 40. "And he shall set the sheep on his right hand, and the goats on his left. Then shall the king say unto them on his right, Come ye, blessed of my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. For I was a hungered, and you gave me meat, and I was thirsty, and you gave me drink, and I was a stranger, and you took me in." And we know what the rest of the verse says. But at the very end of the verse it says, "And the king shall answer and say unto them, Verily I say unto you, insomuch as you have done it unto one of these the least of my brethren, ye have done it unto me." Just think about this. We're to be a light on the world. People are to be drawn to us. So that means that in any situation, people should feel comfortable about coming to us. Just picture somebody in the middle of the night who's being torn. He's wrestling with God and he's debating, God, are you real? Are you not real? And then their vehicle breaks down. And you have two homes, or two driveways anyway, side by side, and it's getting close to being night. And there's this one home, and it's a long drive, and you can kind of see the house in the back, and there's signs that say private property, no trespassing, beware of dog. And then you see the home on the other side, and you can see the house. It might not be lit up because it's night. They might all be in bed sleeping. And you can see that the house is open and it looks more warm and inviting. There's nothing that says that you're not allowed to go on there. There's nothing that says that you can't step foot on that property. Which house is that person going to go to? Which house better represents a Christian that wants all people to come to meet Jesus? Right? If Jesus is in us, then we must realize and understand that the way always needs to be open. The door always needs to be open. There shouldn't be a gate. There shouldn't be fences that are keeping people out. That was not the idea that God had for us. So I know some people might say, well, there's nothing wrong with having fences and stuff like that, because in heaven, there's a wall that goes around New Jerusalem. Now, let me just talk about that for a minute. In that wall, there's 12 gates, and those gates never close. We can see in the Bible that the only time that the gates were to close of any city was a time when people were breaking the Sabbath, and then they commanded that the gates be closed because they couldn't stop the people from breaking the Sabbath. They couldn't stop the people from coming in to try to sell their wares, and then people would just defy the Sabbath and come and buy them. If they didn't buy it, nobody would have came into those walls. That's just obvious. So they started closing the walls every new moon and every Sabbath day. So in heaven, the gates will never close because we don't ever have to worry about sin again. So what is there to keep out? Is the walls actually keeping out anybody? Let's just think about this. What were the walls used for back in Bible times? Let's think about the first wall of a city that I can remember anyway, that we know of that the Bible talks about. It was when Rahab hid the two spies, and she hid them on the roof of the wall. So it was the roof, it was the wall, it was on the roof. She hid the spies up there, and she lived in that. And she even had windows that were in the wall. In the New Jerusalem, is it not going to be the same way? Will not anybody be able to come in and go through people's homes and meet people because they actually live in that wall? That's my thought. I'm speculating on that, but it makes sense. It would be consistent with the Bible. It would be consistent with not wanting to keep people out of the New Jerusalem. And if we think about things, like there's no sin, there's nothing to keep out. So why is that there? On our homes, on our properties, God is our protector. He is our wall. The law is our wall. The law technically is our wall because we have the blessings and cursings in Leviticus that tell us whether or not a lot of these bad things are going to happen to us. And a lot of these bad things that happen to us are because God's saying, hey, you're not keeping my commands or my statutes. And because you're not doing this, I'm sending these things in here to wake you up, to draw you closer to me. And we got to remember all these things. But this is still in a different light than what I want to bring it to. The light I want to bring it to now, we're going to find in Deuteronomy. You'll find it in Leviticus. You'll find it kind of smattered throughout the Bible. In Deuteronomy 24:19 to 21, it says, when thou cuttest down thine harvest in thy field, and hast forgot a sheaf in the field, thou shalt not go out to fetch it again. It shall be for the stranger, for the fatherless, for the widow, that the Lord thy God may bless thee in all the work of thine hands. So if you're cutting out your sheaves, you're not to go out and get it. That's for somebody else. And what was the reason for it? So God can bless you. Not only did he bless that person, and you bless that person because you left it there, but God says, I'm now going to bless you. Verse 20, and when thou beatest thine olive tree, thou shalt not go over the boughs again. It shall be for the stranger, for the fatherless, and for the widow. So when you go over to your trees, do you pick everything to make sure you haven't missed anything? When you see you missed stuff, do you go back or do you leave it? Not only was it for the fatherless, for the widow, but when we see the year of the release was also teaching us that we should be doing a lot of these things every year. Or like, I guess not the year of release, but the sabbatical year for the land, that the food that was left was also for the wild animals. Is not the food that we have here for the wild animals too? I had deer that would live in my garden. I'd get up every morning and I'd see 5 deer in my garden every day. It was not fenced, and God would bless. And they never eat more than what they could. They never strip it so that I'd have nothing. There was always enough for me and for them, and God blessed it. There was this one head of lettuce. Oh, it was a miracle head of lettuce. That's all I can say. The thing was huge. It was a monster. And for 3 days, the deer and my family ate off that head of lettuce. It grew. I've never seen anything like it in my life, and I probably never will again. It reminded me of when the spies came out of the promised land and they were carrying the grapes between them, and they're talking about the fruit. This head of lettuce was at least 10 to 15 times the size of a regular head of lettuce. It was just a monster. Don't ask me how it grew because I have no idea how it grew like that, but it was just amazing. And now the last verse, it says, when thou gatherest the grapes of thy vineyard, that thou shalt not glean it afterwards. It shall be for the stranger, for the fatherless, and for the widow. So all these things are saying, hey, your gardens, your yards, your food is not really your own. God's saying, this is mine. I'm giving it to you as a blessing. But through that blessing that you are working at and tending and keeping, it is also going to be a blessing for all these other people. The Bible does tell us that when we go to heaven, though, that we will grow and another man won't eat. Well, of course, they'll eat if we give it to them, but we don't have to worry about poor ever at that time because there will be no poor people in heaven. Now, I want to go through a Bible verse here that talks about this also in the New Testament to show even Jesus came to verify this law because he came to fulfill the types, which makes them more beautiful because he's showing a stronger relation to these laws and that there's even more to them than what we've ever seen. In Luke 6, verse 1, it says, and it came to pass on the second Sabbath after the first that he went through the cornfields, and his disciples plucked the ears of corn and did eat, rubbing them in their hands. And certain of the Pharisees said unto him, why do ye that which is not lawful to do on the Sabbath days? Now, this is an amazing verse. So I'm bringing this verse in here because for people that want to have some meat of the word, that really understand the word and are looking for some real precious jewels here, I'm going to add something to this. One of the things I want us to notice here is that it says, why do you do that which is not lawful on the Sabbath days? I know that it's Sabbath days because there's actually two things going on here. It tells us specifically in the beginning, and it came to pass after this, sorry, And it came to pass on the second Sabbath after the first. So the first Sabbath of the year, now this is the second Sabbath of the year, which means that this would be a high day. And what I mean by a high day is that this would have been part of the Feast of Unleavened Bread. You would have had the Passover, and then you have the Sabbath, and then it's the feast, which is, the Feast of Unleavened Bread. It's the first day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread, even though the Passover is connected into it. But then you have the Feast of First Fruits. And this is where the Sabbath days comes in. So not only was it a regular Sabbath, but it was also the Feast of First Fruits. And this is why they say Sabbath days. Now, they only really show and make light of the Sabbath day for a particular reason, because it was not as bad a sin to pick something before the Feast of First Fruits. Now, the First Fruits was a type, and they were not allowed to harvest any of their crop before that time. But according to the law, that was only a trespass sin, and they were not condemned to death. But what happened here is they wanted to condemn the disciples to death, is the idea of it, right? Because to break the Sabbath day, they seen that if they broke the Sabbath day, that was a death penalty. And we see that when the man went out to gather sticks and he worked on the Sabbath day. So the same thing happened here, is the Pharisees made known that they were breaking two different laws, but it was a Sabbath that they're really particular on. And the reason why Jesus didn't eat was because he could not mar the type. Jesus knew he was the first fruits, and he could not eat the first fruits before he had to wait until after that day, because he was the first fruit and he couldn't mar the type. And we find that exact same example that happened in the time of Moses, when he struck the rock twice and he marred the image of the rock once smitten. So something else that we need to see in this passage is that the Pharisees didn't say, hey, you're trespassing on somebody's land, you're not allowed to be there. It was in God's law that anybody could go out, and whatever they needed, they were allowed to get in order to support their needs. It was not that they had to ask permission. So people might have said, well, I have a fence around my yard, but if somebody comes and they ask me, I'll let them have whatever they want. That's not how it works. God's like, hey, this land actually isn't yours. This land is my land. I own this world, and I am letting you have this section of it, but it also is to bless others. It is not a blessing just for yourself, because everything we do is to be a blessing for others, which then blesses ourselves. The Bible tells us in Deuteronomy 15:11, for the poor shall never cease out of the land. Therefore I command thee, saying, thou shalt open thy hand wide to thy brother, to the poor and to the needy in thy land. So not only was it for people in the church, thy brothers, but it was to the poor and to the needy. It didn't matter, right? The Bible verses that we just read also talked about the strangers, that, anybody that is in your land. And this is why when we read in Psalms 37, verse 25, I have been young, and now I am old, yet I have not seen the righteous forsaken, nor his seed begging bread. And this is where I bring it back into the Jewish economy. Here we have David saying, I have yet to see the righteous begging bread. Many of the unrighteous, yes, might have been begging bread. But the Jewish economy had it that you're supposed to open up your hand wide to the poor, as we just read, and there was never to be anybody that had any lack or any want. Today you'll see in different areas where people, especially in cities, are making food forests and doing these things. And while that seems good, the difference between the Jewish economy and what man wants to do is the interaction with people. Not only do those people that have a need to be able to recognize and have some interaction with man, even though you don't even need to say anything to them, because you don't ever need to embarrass somebody, but it's to be open and friendly and to show that you have a love for them and that you care for them and that you're actually growing things, specifically for them. And it's not that you want to put it somewhere else where you don't have to have contact with them. It's for that social interaction that might not happen at first, but can happen, because it's the Holy Spirit that leads people. The Holy Spirit could be leading the person that needs the food. The Holy Spirit could lead you to them to talk to them as well. And that is where the blessing is. While it's all good that they're doing these food forests, and that's still kind of unique because obviously there might be things growing there that you don't have yourself that it might be neat for you to try. The idea of you growing it and having it for yourself is so that way you can be a blessing to others. There's a lot of people struggling in this life. And they might see some flowers in your yard that are up near your house, and there's a whole lot of them, and they think, oh, if I just have a few, it'd be really nice. And they go out and they pick a few flowers, and that might mean something to them. God could be speaking to them through those flowers. But God could also be having you see them. And you go outside and you say, oh, you like those flowers. And if you're not confrontational, how great a witness is that? You are a missionary in your own home. And yes, while they might be confrontational and they might say different things, if you show them only love, if they see only Jesus in you, then you have become a witness. You are a missionary. You're doing what you're supposed to do. Have you ever had something that you truly prized? A flower like a rose that opens, that has beautiful splendor, and you've been waiting and watching it grow, and you're so excited to see it? Now, here's a question for you. Is that flower more important than a life? Would it not be better to let somebody have that flower if it were to save their life and bring them to the kingdom of heaven? Jesus was a witness. He was a missionary, even though he was rejected and rebuked. But because of what he did, a lot of these people that were hurt and poor and lowly came to him in the end. So your actions might be a seed planted, even if they're aggressive against you. It does not necessarily mean that they're forsaken. But the Bible tells us that we're supposed to plant fruit trees, and it's not just for ourselves, it's for the poor and the needy. Now, if anybody has known any homeless people, they know, especially if there's orchards around, that these people will go into these orchards sometimes at night and they'll take fruit in order to sustain themselves so they don't starve to death. And here today, this is what we should be doing. Not only should we be providing the bread of life, the Word of God, but we should be providing the bread of life, the sustenance that keeps our bodies going. It's my prayer, my hope that you'll think of these things and look at these things and pray about it. Does my home reflect a light on a hill? Does my actions and my works reflect a light on a hill? Is God's laws in the book of Moses really done away with? Or are they still binding as long as time shall last? Are they not the things that explicitly guard and explain the Ten Commandments? Well, the Ten Commandments and God's laws from the book of the law might not be able to be incorporated into society today, although many of them already are. It's not something that we're not to do in our own lives. There's to be a revival still of primitive godliness, which will bring in a harvest. It's going to be a small harvest. We know that we're at the end of the world and that the majority of the people are going to follow Satan, believing that it's Christ here on this earth, believing in this temporal millennium. But there are those, when they see that we have no walls up, that we have no barriers, that we're not prejudiced against them in any way. All these things are all symbolic, all representative. We're not prejudiced. We do not have walls. We do not have fences. We do not say no trespassing. We let them into our lives. We let them into our homes. We accept them for who they are, not for their sins. We don't accept their sins, but we can lead and guide them to all truth through the law of God. In Psalms 19, it says, the law of the Lord converts a soul. When they see that our souls are converted and they see it from the law, then they can accept Jesus too. And they can accept his love and him into their lives. This is part of the Jewish economy, which would have revolutionized the whole world if they would have understood it.
Do you see? Do you see all the people sinking down? Don't you care? Don't you care? Are you gonna let them drown? How can you be so numb not to care if they come? You close your eyes and pretend the job's done. Oh, bless me, Lord. Bless me, Lord. You know, it's all I ever hear. No one aches, no one hurts, no one even sheds one tear. But he cries, he weeps, he bleeds, and he cares for your needs. And you just lay back and keep soaking it in. Oh, can't you see it's such sin? 'Cause he brings people to your door and you turn them away as you smile and say, God bless you, be at peace. And all heaven just weeps. 'Cause Jesus came to your door. You've left him out on the streets. Open up and give yourself away. You see the need, you hear the cries, so how can you delay? God's calling and you're the one, but like Jonah, you run. He's told you to speak, but you keep holding it in. Oh, can't you see it, such sin? The world is sleeping in the dark that the church just can't fight, 'cause it's asleep in the light. How can you be so dead when you've been so well fed? Jesus rose from the grave, and you can't even get out of bed. Oh, Jesus rose from the dead. Come on, get out of your bed. La da, la da, la da, la da, la da, la da, la. How can you be so numb not to care if they come? You close your eyes and pretend the job's done. You close your eyes and pretend the job's done. Don't close your eyes, don't pretend the job's done. Come away, come away, come away with me, my love. Come away from this mess. Come away with me, my love. Do you see all the people sinking down? Don't you care? Don't you care? Are you gonna let them drown?